Hello friends, today I'm going to show you a very attacking game from Paul Morphy, who has used Scotch Gambit to really kill Hart. This game was played in 1854 and where Morphy was playing with white and he started with e4. Black responds with e5, knight to f3, knight to c6 and then d4. So friends, this d4 move is particularly a Scotch Gambit where black captures this e takes d4, and instead of recapturing the pawn, black usually plays bishop to c4. So that constitutes Scotch Gambit. There are a couple of options available on this position. I will show you. I will continue with the game, but to give you some knowledge, uh, there is one option where this bishop can be developed on e7 or on c5 or possibly a check from b4. Uh, Pawn to d6 is another option, and knight to f6 is possibly another option. Uh, So in the game, d6 was played. So Hart has decided to play d6 instead of playing bishop to c5, which is a very aggressive move, or even the knight at d6. So d6 move, uh, the d6 move is very common. You don't need to learn anything for playing d6. One major problem in d6 is their light square bishop is now very passive. It can only come onto f7 and e7, sorry, and it can only be activated later into the game by going on to the on f6. So friends, when you play d6, there are a couple of options available for the white. This pawn can be captured, so knight to d4 is possible, c3 is also possible, and even you can plan the sacrifice of the bishop at f7. So I will show you one sample land before we move on to the game. Say for example you try to capture knight takes d4. So if white starts the game with knight takes d4, black can try here playing knight to f6. So basically trying to attack onto the pawn at e4. But white can make a small trick here. I would like to show you here. So allow me. First you can do castle, and here if black captures knight takes e4, then it will be a game over for the black here from this position. How? I show you. First you capture knight to c6, black will recapture b takes c6, and then rook to e1 will come in, and which will pin the knight here. um, so the white's idea here is to just push the pawn at f3 and try to win the knight. But if black tries to hang on to this, saying, say I attack on the bishop, so but this is also not possible. Say for example, if black is hoping that bishop will move to d4 and then I will play bishop to e7, and then when you and then I can move the knight, but there's one small trick available here. Say a beautiful uh, exchange sacrifice where rook takes e4 check, and now what would you do if you capture this? D takes e4, but then bishop to f7 check, and if you try to capture the bishop, then you will lose the queen. And or even worse, if you try to move the king to e7, then dark square bishop to d5 will lose the queen. So this is all of those things are possible. So let's go back to the game where Paul Morphy played c3 and uh, Hart takes d takes c3. So Hart Hart did not try to do any of those fancy stuff. But here queen to b3 now, and the idea behind is to attack onto this weak f7 pawn. There are a couple of options available: queen to d7, queen to e7, or even queen to uh, f6 is also available. But you one need to be very careful playing queen to f6, because then bishop to g5 would be very devastating. But here at this position, Hart played queen to e7, so he defended this pawn with the queen, uh, castles for the white, and now b6 was played. So b6, the reason behind b6, first we want to the bishop wants to go on b7. Black is trying to prepare the castle onto the queen side, um, but c takes b2 is also possible. But if you go onto if you go onto these lines, say I show you one thing here. If you try c takes b2, but then bishop takes b2, and those lines will be very oops, sorry, those lines would be very difficult to defend. So that is why b6 was played. And now knight to c3. So Murphy Murphy has developed his one of the minor pieces, uh, but and that too come with the tempo. Now knight to a5. So knight to a5, because Murphy is trying to neutralize some of the attack by forking queen and the bishop, and his idea is to, of course, here white will save the queen, so queen goes to b4, and now knight takes c4, where queen takes c4, and some maybe a little bit of the threat on f7 has been neutralized. So now black can play bishop to b7. Here on this position, rook to e1 first, so because you need to defend this pawn at e4, and then white castles queen side, and bishop to f4 is the move. And so here Murphy has started planning an attack onto this c7 square. So to defend this, first of all, f6 was played. So the move g5 is coming, but here rook to a7, rook a to c1, and rook a to c1. Next move is knight to d5 is coming, which will be that that will fork the queen and the pawn. So all of those threats are there. That is why Hart moved the king from from this line, and he played king to b8. But now knight to d5, as I explained earlier, where bishop takes d5. You have to kill the bishop here at this position, otherwise it will be a very difficult to defend. But then e takes d5, it will be a discovered attack onto the queen. So queen move to d7. Of course you cannot move queen from this 7th rank, because there's an attack on c7 pawn. But here on this position, knight to d4 was played. So now what's coming? Knight to c6 is coming, which will fork. Oops, sorry. Yeah, knight to c6 is coming, which will fork the king and the rook. So knight to e7 was played. So basically, black is trying to defend the c6 square. You can play the couple of moves available. The queen can go on to a6. The knight can also go on to b5. But Paul Murphy was on a really devastating mood. He played rook to e7. So yes, a beautiful rook exchange. Of course, you cannot take it from the queen because knight to c6 still coming and you will lose the queen. Here bishop takes e7, but queen to a6 first. Why? Because here if I play knight to c6 first, then the king can be moved on to b7, but and then this threat will be neutralized. So queen to c6 first, and now knight to c6 is coming. There is very little defense here, so Hart played c5. You can still play knight to c6, but now this pawn is being defended by the queen, so this will not be a very good the of course the attack will be neutralized. So um, D takes c6 and passant has been played, and now there's an attack onto the queen, so queen have to move on to c8. So Hart was trying to exchange the queens here, and then he thought he will be fine, but as I said, Morphy was on a very different mood today. He simply pushed the pawn, and it will be a check and a fork onto the rook. So c7 check, and what options you have? Of course, you cannot capture it with the queen because then you will lose the queen and ultimately lose the game. So Morphy played Hart played king to a8, but then c takes d8 and promoted to the queen, and now this queen is pinned. So what options you have? Of course, you would like to capture it with the queen takes d8. Say for example here on this position, if you capture it with the rook, but then rook to c8, you lose the queen, and then it will be game over in few moves. So queen takes d8, uh, and now knight to b5 is there. Knight to b5 because of you are now attacking on a7 pawn. So queen to b8, you have to defend this. Frankly, the game is over at this position. Of course, Paul Morphy played rook to c7, but he can also play knight to c7. Here at this position, the king cannot be moved, so the only move is available, queen to c7. But then rook to c7, and then what options you have? There'll be checkmate in the next move. So but in the game, let's go back to the game. Morphy played rook to c7. So here the only option left is to capture the rook by the queen. So queen takes c7, and then knight to c7 check, and that from here onwards the formalities are only left. So king to b8, knight to b5. Uh, Hart should have resigned at this position, but he chosen to play rook to d8, but then queen takes a7 check, and king to c8 and queen to c7 checkmate. So that's how that was one of the beautiful games on the Scotch Gambit by Paul Morphy, which I would try to show you here. So you can play Scotch Gambit in your games. That trust me, it's very aggressive line, and if you play it right, there are lots and lots of fun way to play with. Uh, Let me know in your comments how you like this video. If you've enjoyed it, do press the like button. That will motivate me. And do subscribe it for more aggressive games. Till then, take care. Bye bye.